hybrid side event, the importance and appropriate care for the dead from a human rights perspective, experience from Slovenia. My name is Mattia Tosato, and I'm honored to moderate today's session. Before we begin, let me share some important housekeeping notes. First of all, this meeting is being recorded. If anyone has concern about this, please notify the organizer immediately. Second, only the organizer are permitted to take photographs. We kindly ask all participants to refrain from taking pictures during this event. There will be also people that are following us online. So the event is organized in collaboration with Pax Christi International, the German Commission for Justice and Peace, Association United on Lipa Reconciliation, Nova Slovenska Ravedza, Renovabis. As I'm reflecting on today's topic, I'm reminded of my first year at the university, where one of my professors introduced the Sophocles' Antigone to explain the distinction between natural law and positive law. In the play, Antigone defies the state decree by burying her brothers, honoring her belief in natural law. Tragically, she is condemned for this act and its conflict with the positive law of the land. Today's event seeks to explore how respecting and appropriate caring for the deceased uphold human rights, fostering reconciliation and strengthen societal cohesion. Using Slovenian experience as a foundation, we will examine practical ways to enhance both international and national response to these critical issues and propose some recommendations. Ensuring the dignity of those who have passed away is not only a matter of cultural and religious concern, but also is a moral and legal imperative. IHL provides clear obligation for the treatment of the deceased during armed conflict. Another legal framework, human rights law and disaster law, extend this duty to include disaster, migration, and beyond. Together, we aim to inspire action and collaboration in addressing these deeply human issues. In particular, the shared experience in this discussion will provide valuable food for thought within the Slovenia Universal Periodic Review process, offering best practices that can enhance and build up the measure already in place. Allow me to introduce our speaker. And sorry for any mispronunciation of the names and affiliation, Dr. Bernhard Hirschberger from the German Commission for Justice and Peace, Mr. Tilen Veziniak from Justice and Peace Slovenia, Professor Janec Juhant, representing the Association United on Lipa Reconciliation, Mr. Peter Susnik from Nova Slovenska Zavedza, and the association and the Associate Professor Katerina Lipa Kompan-Erzvazar from the University of Ljubljana that is online and will join shortly. After the intervention, we will open the floor for any Q&A, And of course, if online someone want to make some questions, please write in the chat and I will then explain the questions. Dr. Hirschberg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the appropriate care for the dead is a fundamental human need, transcending all cultures and eras of human history. Humans are characterized by being creatures who care for their dead. Rituals and places of mourning offer the opportunity to say farewell and to come to terms with this profound rupture in the journey through human life. However, the appropriate care for the dead is jeopardized in many ways. In particular, little attention is often paid to the needs of vulnerable groups. For instance, in many places, legal regulations make it difficult, especially for minorities, to bury the dead according to the rites of their religion or belief. Another example are refugees who've died while fleeing. Usually, they're not identified and only buried in nameless graves, if at all. Also, poverty and loneliness often obstruct in our modern societies the dead being treated with dignity quite often. Last but not least, the appropriate care for the dead is often deliberately violated, especially in the context of wars and as a means of repressive rule. The demonstrative desecration of corpses, defamation of the dead, and enforced disappearances are particularly serious crimes which are used for intimidation, discrediting, and humiliation. These neglections and violations do not only affect the dead themselves, but they also have far-reaching implications for the living. Bereaved relatives are denied the opportunity to say farewell. Yet mourning rituals play a crucial role in realizing the loss, in dealing with the pain and vulnerability associated with the loss, and in being able to reorganize one's own life after the serious rupture. If the fate and whereabouts of the deceased are unknown, this leads to an agonizing feeling of uncertainty. If a funeral cannot be organized according to one's own religious beliefs, many bereaved people worry about the salvation of their deceased loved one. In addition to this enormous psychological burden I've just described, many relatives are also confronted with socioeconomic burdens. They spend large amounts of money, time, and energy searching for the deceased. Even the economic existence of the bereaved can be threatened. If the death is not officially recognized, often inheritance and welfare entitlements are denied. Moreover, if misrepresentations about the cause of the death are spread, this can lead to the stigmatization of the family of the deceased. Therefore, manner in which the dead are cared for shows indeed the degree of humanity or also inhumanity of a society. There's good reason why the need to preserve respect for the dead is recognized by legislative frameworks worldwide, for example in the form of penalizing desecration of graves or also in other forms. It is, of course, it is acknowledged that this is a fundamental interest of the living, and it is a prerequisite for societal peace. The serious consequences of a failure to care for the dead appropriately for the society as a whole become particularly apparent in contexts with a violent past. Refusing to care for the dead appropriately creates a toxic climate that divides and paralyzes societies for decades to come. Peace and reconciliation processes are impeded or even made impossible. If the democratic forces committed to the rule of law fail to ensure that the dead are cared for appropriately, there's also a risk that extremist forces will instrumentalize the issue for their inhumane ideologies. Caring for the dead with dignity, therefore, is indeed a question of human rights and human dignity. The need to care for the deceased is deeply rooted in human nature and is a cornerstone of human civilization and culture. If this basic need and the dignity of the dead are ignored or even questioned, human rights and human dignity are undermined. In this respect, the international community is called upon to counteract such violations of human rights. Indeed, a whole range of different human rights are affected. First of all, the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance recognizes the right to the truth. All the relatives of victims of enforced disappearance and all other natural persons who have suffered harm as the direct result of an enforced disappearance have the right to know the truth regarding the circumstances of the enforced disappearance, regarding the progress and the results of the investigation, and regarding the fate of the disappeared person. In the event of death, there is an obligation to locate, respect, and return the mortal remains. All state parties are required to afford one another the greatest measure of mutual assistance in exhuming and identifying the dead and returning their remains. Furthermore, there is an obligation to compile official documentation of the circumstances and the cause of the death and the destination of the remains. This is information which must be made available to any person with a legitimate interest. Furthermore, also freedom of religion or belief is affected. All major religious communities offer an interpretive framework for understanding death and its meaning, and all of them are accompanying grieving members of their community. Rituals of mourning and bidding farewell to the deceased members of the community are indeed an integral part of religious life. If the bereaved relatives are denied the right to bury the deceased according to their religion or belief, this therefore represents a massive encroachment on the free exercise of faith. The right to family is affected as well. The right to respect for private and family life, as set out in Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, for example, entails certain rights of the relatives, such as the right to receive information on the whereabouts of the dead and to have a voice with regard to the burial. In general, numerous provisions of the international law recognize the need for rights of the next of kin to obtain information and participate. The provisions of the international humanitarian law should be emphasized in particular. The Geneva Conventions contain extensive provisions on the treatment of the dead and the right of surviving dependents to obtain information and participate. Moreover, the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions has also emphasized the particular importance of ensuring the protection of the dead. In a report presented last year, he emphasized the need to ensure the protection of the dead and their mortal remains, including of victims of potentially unlawful killings. Additionally, in some countries, there are also additional provisions for the protection of burial and memorial sites of indigenous populations. Looking at all this, what I've just presented, in the view of the fundamental significance of the appropriate care for the dead, for the living, from a human rights perspective, the United Nations would be indeed well advised to recognize the right of appropriate care for the dead also on its own as a universally valid human right. This could be made, for example, in the form of a resolution of the Human Rights Council. Reasons for this have been compiled by an interdisciplinary working group of the German Commission for Justice and Peace in the publication How Society Cares for the Dead, a Matter of Human Dignity. We brought some copies of this publication with us. If you should be interested, you're very much welcome to take a copy with you. Just tell us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you a lot. Mr. Wezniak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Many thanks go also to Helena Jaklic, who helped preparing following speech. Burying the dead is not only a matter of respect and reverence for the dead, but also an important aspect of human rights. Ensuring the dignity of the deceased and their relatives is part of the fundamental values of any democratic society. This includes both the physical arrangement of the remains and a symbolic recognition of their humanity and their importance to the community. Caring for the deceased begins with a basic principle of respect for the body of the deceased, which is upheld by international documents such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration stresses that everyone has the right to dignity and equality, which also applies after death. The right to the grave, to the identification of remains, and to the notification of relatives is also enshrined in international humanitarian law, in particular in the Conventions on War and Conflict. Clandestine burial sites are a repeated violation of human rights. First, lives have been taken without due process, contrary to the rule of law. Secondly, the denial of the existence of the graves and the privation access to information for the relatives and consequently for society as a whole constitute a violation of the right to truth, which is upheld by international standards. Slovenia as a society is facing the historical trauma of the post-war killings after the Second World War. Slovenia has more than 700 post-war killing sites, where over 100,000 people were executed without trial after the Second World War. Not only disarmed soldiers who were returned to Yugoslavia after the war, but also many civilians. This event represents one of the darkest chapters in Slovenian history. To this day, public discourse on this issue has been limited and extremely rigid for political and ideological reasons. Just before the collapse of Yugoslavia, the Communist Party, as the main political force in Slovenia, ordered the destruction of all the archives of the former state security service, such as KGB and NKVD. This has resulted in the destruction of over 90% of all archivistic material that could have been used to reconstruct the post-war events, to locate all the killing sites, and to have a list all of names of all the murdered people and the place of their death. Slovenia faces a particularly burdensome legacy of post-war killings, which highlights the need for appropriate action at the level of states and the society to ensure that the murdered receive a dignified burial. They still remain in the plastic boxes in the mines because Slovenian politics for more than 30 years has refused to confront this problem or even actively opposed it. And the same is still true today. In 2015, Slovenia adopted the law on concealed war graves and the burial of victims, which re-established the Commission for the Resolution of Concealed Graves. The Commission has taken important steps towards the discovery of post-war graves, the exhumation of remains, the establishment of a dignified attitude towards the dead and their burial, but has faced obstacles throughout the years up to the present days, especially at the institutional and political level. In October 2022, 3,450 remains were excavated from Mestna Nova Gorica. This is the largest excavation of post-war victims to date. Instead of the state providing a decent burial, the remains are still in the plastic boxes at the municipality. Civil society, as well as the relatives of the murdered, have been constantly warning the Slovenian political leadership of the need to give the victims a decent burial, but to no avail. Quite the opposite. This government has abolished the Day of Remembrance for the victims of communist violence. It is important to realize that the regulation of burial sites is not only a political task, but also a moral and human duty. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Ioan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am relating to the just said and adding some problems which are very important for the burial of victims which were just mentioned. I think it is necessary in Slovenia such Truth and Reconciliation Commission like in South Africa and other good practices which were taken in several states. And I am sure that it is a very difficult task, but we have to proceed it. In Slovenia, the relatives of victims and competent organizations are still fighting for the truth about the violation of the rights of those murdered after the Second World War, which are still accounted for as disappeared and have not achieved full rehabilitation. They were extrajudicially plunged into cruel suffering and deaths. As I said, Slovenia had about 750 sites of such massacres, and about 100,000 people, among them 20,000 Slovenes, were killed and other nations were killed after the Second World War in 1945. Of these, several thousand were excavated, who were then either temporarily buried in a common mass grave in Maribor, the second largest city in Slovenia. Many of them excavated, however, are still waiting, either in makeshift crates in irreverently disputed sites for a dignified burial. The competent government expert commission, those present here organizations and competent organizations and relatives of the victims suggest burial in the cemetery Žale in Ljubljana, in the capital of Slovenia. Žale is central cemetery of the capital of Slovenia, Ljubljana. There are already graves of Italian, German, Russian, and other soldiers from the First and Second World Wars who are died in this territory, and so should be buried these victims too. In accordance with the international conventions and constitutions, an immediate burial is to be carried out as a first step towards recognition of the universal and ancient right of victims to a grave. This will also open the path to the second step, which is the right to respect to private and family life, as laid down in Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which includes certain rights of relatives, such as the right to information about the whereabouts of the dead, and the right for relatives to express their wish as to where and how their relatives should be buried with dignity. Burial at the Žale cemetery in Ljubljana as a center of most accessible place for all relatives is being hindered by the mayor of Ljubljana, of the city. Also, the competent government commission has determined that burial is to take place at this cemetery. Reasons for burial in Žale are following. Burial in the center of Ljubljana is most suitable due to the accessibility of the mass graves relatives from all parts of the country. For now, most of these victims are still anonymous, also their famous bones been appropriately coded for DNA. Secondly, the burial in the capital of this country is a symbolic sign that the state accepts the victims as its own, and a step towards acknowledging the truth about the victims of violence and towards national reconciliation and freeing the perpetrators and victims from the burdens of violence. And third, the victims buried in Ljubljana are given the same place as other victims of the World War and World I and World War II and the Revolution, which means establishing a central place of mourning and remembrance of all suffering caused by these violent regimes. With the burial, the state will formally confirm its democratic commitment to the victims. And fourth and end, we plant the reconciliation lime tree at Žale as a symbol of reconciliation for all citizens of Slovenia, which is what our association strives for. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Mr. Susnik, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we are gathered here on this special day, January 27th, which is also the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, we should reflect on an unfathomable reality of Europe, that in our midst we still have concealed mass graves, thousands of unidentified victims, and some exhumed but unburied human remains. The horrible and shocking extrajudicial, summary, and arbitrary execution of vast numbers of persons is still not subject to simple universal condemnation as an abhorrent act. It was and remains not a crime humanity recognizes as the result of the abominable rejection of basic morals held by civilization as a whole, without regard to religion, race, cultural, and national identification. The act of mass murder was and still is judged more by the level of condemnation of the intent of the perpetrator than by the crime itself. It is a paradox that 80 years ago today, the Red Army could be shocked by the scenes unfolding before them, yet were contemporaneously also an instrumental part of implementing a doctrine of imprisonment, torture, mass execution, and then decades-long denial and cover-up. It was this Red Army and the Soviet political leadership thereof who inspired, educated, and assisted the Communist Party of Slovenia in preparing and diligently executing the mass killings of over 15,000 Slovenian men and women. Documents, testimony, and evidence are abundant that the mass killings were premeditated in spring of 1945, after the repulsion among Allies had sunk in, following the liberation of numerous concentration camps facilitating the final solution. It remains clear to this day that, despite numerous resolutions, reports, and declarations of governments and international institutions, mass murder and extrajudicial killings perpetrated in the name of communism are awarded the legitimacy of free speech when debating the motivation and reasoning of the perpetrators. We are here today as we battle the perception of a majority of Slovenian public servants, politicians, academia, members of the judiciary, and the media, that we may find excuses for these mass extrajudicial killings to take place if we only look deeply enough. This permissive environment of relativism is the greatest challenge as we face the consequences of exhumation of the remains of 3,450 men from Macés Nova Gorica. That Slovenia is not alone in coming to terms with extrajudicial summary or arbitrary execution is notable, even if regrettable. The report presented in 2024 by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Special Rapporteur Maurice Tidball-Binz, titled Protection of the Dead, addresses almost all the topics pertaining to human rights we have come across during the past 5 years in wake of the discovery of a Macés Nova Gorica and the exhumation of the human remains buried within this cave. That such a report of an esteemed international organization is required in our times is a defeat for all who consider that some human rights should be self-evident and embedded in the moral compass of any human being. It appears the report states the obvious, centuries-old guidelines, how to respect human life, the dead, the grieving, and the facilitation of justice without revenge. One of the foundational responsibilities identified by the Special Rapporteur, building on historical convention and protocols adopted in the 20th century, is the meticulous collection, preservation, and analysis of remains of deceased persons. This process is crucial in determining the identity of the deceased, understanding the circumstances of death, and providing closure to families. While these responsibilities were meticulously executed, we have hit a stalemate in the final phase of the intended goal. Forensic pathology, anthropology, and DNA testing is required to piece together the story of the deceased. It is imperative that Slovenia invests in forensic technology and expertise to handle the identification of the deceased. By doing so, the nation can ensure that the remains are treated with the utmost respect and that the truth is uncovered for historical and familial reconciliation. The dignity and respect of the deceased are non-negotiable principles. Every individual, regardless of the circumstances of their death, deserves to be treated with humanity and respect. This involves not only the careful handling of their remains, but also the consideration of their cultural, religious, and personal backgrounds. The dead have specific rights and rituals that must be observed. Ignoring these causes immense pain for the families and communities involved. Thus, it is crucial for authorities to engage with the families and communities to understand and honor these practices. Our experience with the exhumed from Maceș Nova Gorica shows that respecting the dead is particularly poignant. The Slovenian authorities should be working closely with the representatives of victims' families and religious leaders to ensure that the exhumation and reburial processes align with the wishes and traditions of those affected. This approach not only honors the deceased, but also fosters healing and reconciliation within the community. We stress that the politicization of the burial process and degrading the discussion to technocratic efficacy, as currently underway for more than 2 years, is unacceptable. Another critical lesson from the Special Rapporteur is the duty to investigate every death. This duty is not only a legal obligation, but also a moral one. Investigations must be thorough, impartial, and carried out promptly. They should aim to uncover the truth, establish accountability, and provide justice for the victims and their families. Such investigations require a robust legal framework, trained personnel, and sufficient resources. They must also be transparent, allowing for public scrutiny and confidence in the process. In Slovenia, this duty to investigate takes on added significance. The historical mass graves are a stark reminder of past atrocities. By committing to thorough investigations, Slovenia can demonstrate its dedication to justice and human rights. Seeking justice on a full objective confrontation with the tragedy of this historical period, we can finally overcome the absurdity of the existence of over 700 concealed mass grave sites, over 20,000 dead, and not even one perpetrator named as a suspect of these crimes. The Maceș Nova Gorica gravesite exhumation process will not be the last. As the largest to date, it is evidence of a systemic, massive violation of basic human rights and international law, not only in the context of historical circumstances at the time, but also in the still present inability to condemn such excesses and embrace the need for national reconciliation based on truth and admission of guilt. This also aligns with exactly the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, of which Slovenia is a signatory. Until these crimes are dealt with, until these missing persons are identified, we continue to be in violation of this exact convention. The discussion here today reflects our common understanding that the reason we have avoided the temptation of wiping the remains of Auschwitz-Birkenau from the face of the earth in shame is due to the need to have a point of reference to pierce the human mind as it deals with the trauma of crimes committed and the analysis of how they were allowed to happen. So too, Maceș Nova Gorica and the victims, currently awaiting burial in a garage, out of sight and out of mind, need to become a centerpiece in our collective Slovenian subconscious to pause and reflect and provide a national psychological barrier, deterring us from crossing it again. We have ventured over this barrier and can understand the brutal misery which lies beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now the Professor Kompan Erzdar will join us from online, so please use your headphones. Can you hear us? No, we cannot hear you. No, we cannot hear the... Let's see if... We are trying. Can you hear us or not? We cannot hear you, by the way. She can, but not. We cannot hear her. I don't know if the... I don't know if the technical support can help us. Not yet. We are working on it.
Should we?
Just wait 1 minute more, and otherwise we can.
She has now this, right?
It's muted, yeah.
Yes,
Simple
she just
for
muted.
You are just muted.
This is better now, yes. She was just...
But now she's unmuted.
And now it's
No.
not
No, just still muted.
still muted. While waiting a little bit, I just want to make use my privilege to as a moderator to ask questions that then we can try to reply. Is considering the universal periodic review process?
She says it's on her side.
Ah, okay. It's Professor. It seems that is on your side. It's not on our side that is not working.
No. No.
Hi, could you try to disconnect and reconnect to the meeting, please?
Yeah, no, I think that the IT is doing that. Just I was saying, I'm using my privilege to ask some question before starting and open the floor. Is considering the universal periodic review process, what specific step could Slovenia take to further enhance compliance with international standard on the dignity and care of the deceased?
Yeah, we mentioned during our interventions that Slovenia also has joined the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. And obviously from this convention, there are also resulting certain obligations, and it's also the prevalent legal view that those obligations are valid as long as the effects of the problem are still existing. And as we've just heard very much in detail, we've got very much problems which are covered by the convention, which are not solved yet. There's still nameless graves, mass graves, unburied dead. So just what we've explained, what needs to be done. That's also obligations which should be implemented by the Slovenian government and authorities as soon as possible. And certainly that would be also a good recommendation to be raised during the UPR process, that Slovenia, which thankfully has signed that important convention, should meet all its obligations resulting from that particular convention to address the continuous effect of the crimes.
Other comment?
If I may.
Yeah, sure.
I think in general, the United Nations, in the debate on a concrete example of Slovenia, should take up not just the report of the special rapporteur, but also reflect on how this report in general can be codified to make sure that we put forward a pathway for all nations, not just Slovenia, for all nations, on how to deal with the problem of deceased, unburied, missing persons. I think the United Nations is faced with this in many different lands, in many different countries, in many different cultures. Throughout history, this has been an issue, as Dr. Hirschberger mentioned in his presentation. And I think it is not the purpose of the UPR for simply to put forward a recommendation for Slovenia, because this is a general problem which is coming to light more and more in wake of all conflicts and of all issues, especially in terms of human trafficking, in terms of refugees, in terms of war sites, and so on. So I think a recommendation here would generally need to be 2 points. One, of course, for Slovenia to deal with this issue proactively, and another to also see how to codify the Special Rapporteur's recommendations, which make common sense and could probably be absolutely agreed upon by all nation states, members of the United Nations.
Thank you. Just wait a little bit. Let's see if Professor Kompatzer can make the intervention or not. No, it seems I cannot hear the... She's trying, but it's not, it doesn't work. It's pity. Yes, yeah, Janets, please. Well, just waiting again.
Thank you. I would say the process of healing is very difficult. About this should speak Professor Kompatzer. But it is necessary for healing not just the problems of individual persons, but healing of problems of the society, because no society can live good if they are not reconciled. It's a very difficult process. If I mentioned the problem of truth and commission in South Africa, which were taken to reconcile the society after apartheid, and several other processes, maybe in Northern Ireland and so on, shows that this is very difficult and very sustainable and very complicated problem, but to live good for the society, to be democratic society, it is needed to go through this process. And if we are taking these processes in individual, all suffering in our individual life, and all suffering, especially if there are familial lives, and if suffering is in the common community, it is very difficult, but we have to face it to solve our problems and to live normally and to be actually democratic and perhaps a very good society for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if now we will work or... I think, yeah, she should reset it again.
She needs to log out and log back in again.
I think so again, to log in and log out again. So just waiting again, I will open the floor if there is any questions. And please state your name and your organization.
Hello. Sharov Aziz of Justice for All International. Thank you so much for such a valuable and very informative presentations. I was, in fact, not expecting to hear the discussion about the right of deceased persons, which is indeed, I think, is one of the most important issues at the moment, especially when it comes to really realizing our humanity, especially in the context of ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, events that we actually witnessed in Syria when deceased people were desecrated, their relatives were actually being seen on the scene when the deceased were mutilated, attacked by mobs, and it's not only indeed for the rights of the deceased, but also their beloved ones, their relatives. I think the issue that was raised regarding the truth and reconciliation after the Second World War in the context of Yugoslavia and how the people returning to Slovenia were treated, possibly massively massacred and then put in a mass graves. I think it deserves really like attention by international community. And thank you so much for bringing up this issue. My question is, I can see that there is quite a strong interest in Slovenia regarding this issue. I was wondering if there were any submissions from your side to the special procedures of the United Nations, specifically to the Special Rapporteur on the Justice and Reconciliation, Special Rapporteur on the Right to Life, it's summary executions, who actually wrote this very interesting, most interesting, I think, report in the last decade of the Special Rapporteur and his predecessors. And if there are any approaches were made towards the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religious of belief, as it was mentioned, indeed, the right to freedom of religion of belief and also violated in this kind of cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment?
Yeah, thank you very much for the excellent comments and also for the very relevant questions. Indeed, as I mentioned before, we crafted we had an expert group looking at different contexts where the topic is relevant, context of war, context of migration, with the related humanitarian disaster, as well as different contexts of enforced disappearance. And we gathered the information we could gather there also from exchange with various international partners in this publication, and we shared that publication also with the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions. And I personally was also in touch with the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief, and she indeed also is very interested on the topic because in various contexts, if you think about the persecution of the Baha'i in many countries, there is a systematic destruction of the graves. Also during the pandemic, we had problems because of hygienic regulations. In many countries, it was obligatory to burn the dead, to have crematorial burials, and that's not fitting to matching the religious beliefs of many people. For instance, Christians, traditional beliefs, where there's the belief that it's necessary to have earth burial. On a dogmatic view, that's not up to date any longer, but still it's important for many people, and that's what human rights are about. What's the beliefs of the people, and that's just a few examples. I mentioned also the example about that people, relatives worry about the salvation of their deceased ones if the body is not found in a complete piece, but just some parts of the body. And when we're speaking, for instance, about the Christian belief on resurrection, when some relatives are worrying about what's happening to our relatives, is resurrection possible according to the Christian faith or not? And when it's important that the pastoral care intervenes, but that it's also something which needs to be supported and which needs to be at the level of awareness at the very first. And yeah, I mentioned also the issue of regulations, which are regulating what forms of burials are allowed in countries, especially in countries which are have a significant migration with incoming different burial traditions that can lead to many conflicts. So that's something, for instance, we see in Germany, where we've got a growing Muslim population, for instance, and then also for a long time already Jewish communities, strong Jewish communities. We've got different burial rules within the religion or belief system, and which are conflicting partially with the regulations which are set up by the local authorities, and then this again raises serious concerns for this religious believers. Just to mention some examples, but that's actually a topic on its own, and actually we are also considering to organize a conference on the topic of the importance of treating the dead with dignity, and what are the implications from a freedom of religion or belief perspective.
Thank you. I don't know if the professor now is working.
Professor's working.
The professor is working. I don't know if the microphone is working now, and she can make the intervention.
Let's see.
I think that now we see someone else in the. She's not there.
No.
Otherwise,
here we go.
Here we go.
Nope.
Nope. I don't know if it's the channel. No, it's not the channel.
No.
It's really, I don't know how to. Otherwise, there are other questions, intervention. Slovenia, you have the floor. Thank you.
Very much. Just a short thank you and appreciation for visiting Geneva, Dobrodošli v Ženevi for the Slovenian one. Indeed, it's the exchange that we need to carefully reconsider and consider also in the context of being an international issue. Of course, not just Slovenian one. The caring for the dead is, I believe, indeed in the core of us being human beings and core of the humanity. And also, thank you very much for all the references to international conventions that which are applied here. All of us should read them very carefully. Also, the reports of the special rapporteurs, which are numerous. I would just like to ask, just because I was writing and I did not follow the special rapporteur's report that Mr. Sushnik, you were referring to, which special rapporteur is that?
The protection of the dead.
Protection of the dead. Okay. Thank you very much. This is all from my side. I'm looking forward to the further exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's try again and see if it's working. It seems not.
We'll try and connect by phone.
We try to connect by phone. Is not usual, but
we have video and then we have sound.
Let's try to have a call.
Are there any online questions?
I don't know if there is any online question. If there is someone also online that want to make. Let's try with the online with the phone.
There's some technology.
Curse of technology.
Yeah, it seems.
Lovely expression. No, and she's not. My phone is also off. So.
It is not working. We see there is someone that want to make a questions online. Francis Kinderhofer. You have the floor if you want to make questions. please do it.
He can also not connect. He also
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Now we know. Yes.
It's okay.
My English is not. Can I speak in Slovenian or German?
I think I think that someone else also can help to make a translation. Feel free to speak also in Slovenian. Yeah.
Also in Slovenian speak.
Feel free to speak in Slovenian. Don't worry.
Ja, jaz bi se tukaj lotil enega, jaz vidim tukaj en globlji problem, ker ravno pri diskusiji gospoda Hirschbergerja sem ugotovil, da se je
It's breaking up. It's breaking up. So it's very
oziroma je videl pri pogrebu neki drugi problem.
Can you write it in the chat so we can make it? Thanks. I don't know if Professor now, so the system is working. Is on your side that we have some problem? No, it seems that is the computer.
Yeah.
We're breaking up.
We are breaking up.
Okay.
No, I don't know if there is. Sorry, Franz Kinderhofer, there is a breaking up. If you can write the question, will be better. I don't know if there is any other comment, and we wait at least other 3 minutes to see if Professor Katarina could make her intervention. Otherwise, I don't know if there is any other comments that you want to make. I think that there is a lot of work to do on our side to make recommendation at the UPR level, and also to the states to accept these recommendations, to all the states accept this recommendation in the UPR and then implement that recommendation. I don't know if she's. No. Professor. Yeah.
Professor Erzar.
No. It's not the case, so I want to thank all of you. Sorry, Professor, we cannot hear you. I want to thank all of you for this interesting discussion. I think that it's clear that the experience of Slovenia is a valuable lesson for the global community. By respecting dignity, ensuring proper management of remains, and addressing societal and emotional impact, we can contribute to greater reconciliation and stronger societal cohesion. I think that, as I mentioned before, there is a need to continue the work. I think also for Pax Christi, we will have to reflect how to, in our discussion about peace and reconciliation, also this aspect on and also to make a specific recommendation to each states. And I want to thank you. I don't know if there is any other comment in the, otherwise, yeah, feel free.
I think as we look to solve this issue, we should avoid one trap. And that is that the trap of dealing with the dead also means that we are looking for guilty parties, that it is an admission of guilt if you deal with the dead. It is not. It is a matter of human dignity. It is a matter of civilization. It is not a matter of admission of guilt. It is not a matter of owning up to the criminality of such. It is not a matter of betraying someone that is close to you, maybe politically, maybe ideologically, maybe personally. It is not an other matter than simply a matter of civilization and what we owe to the morals that make us humans, which separates us from all other species on Earth. I think if we look at it this way, these problems can be solved. If we look at it in any other context, then we enter into endless debates, which make absolutely no common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Just a short comment. It is very important that it is a ground of the good life of community if we are burying the death, and it is a good ground of reconciled society for the future. These are the grounds we are working on. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know. I will try the last time if it's working. No. It's not
I think
working.
she's trying to call someone on the podium.
Okay. Yes. So thank you. Sorry for this IT problem. And I just want to thank you and close the meeting. Thanks to all. Bye.